If you were with us last week, then you know that during our time capsule, we took a closer look at what turned out to be a real game changer for the Triumph company back in 1959, when the Bonneville T100 was created by famed designer Edward Turner for the American market. The 650cc air-cooled parallel twin paid tribute to a Texas racer known as Johnny Allen, who had broken several land speed records using Triumph-powered motorcycles on the Bonneville salt flats back in the mid-50s. It was an instant hit. Fast forward now some 5 decades, and the new Bonnie has grown both in displacement and modcoms. Displacing now some 865 cc's, the T100 also sports fuel injection and disc brakes, while still retaining the original spoked wheels and pea-shooter pipes. This new machine certainly looks like a Bonneville of yesteryear. But how does it ride and perform? Well, here's what one of our super fans had to say after a day in the saddle.
So Daryl, what was your first impression when you walked up to the motorcycle this morning?
Well, first impression, I kind of thought I was back in the 60s, looking at this steel idling piece of metal first thing in the morning with the choke on. It's got a choke. I was quite impressed, and I'm not used to anything along this line. So I must say I really liked the sound of it. It was a really kind of a deep, throaty sound, and nothing like I've ever heard before.
Yeah, I would agree. When we first fired it up, it was like, wow, that's an unusual but cool sound.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that motor. We were shooting you riding along this morning, and I thought, it looks like it could be from the 60s. It's very pretty. What was it like to ride?
Well, when you read about it, it sounds old and kind of old school, and you would kind of think it's maybe a little bit, lacking in the power side. But when you hop on this motorcycle, it feels like it's got engineered new technology, and that's exactly what it has. It's fuel injected, and this motorcycle catches you off guard with the amount of torque and power that it has.
Right.
I noticed there was a very tall first gear, which I was quite impressed. You kind of almost thought I was started out in second gear, but it was actually first.
Suspension, we were on some pretty choppy roads today, lots of potholes. How did you find just the ride of the bike? I noticed the saddle didn't look too cushy. It was wide, but not too cushy, but put it together with the suspension, how was the ride?
The ride is actually a lot better than what it looks. It absorbs impact or road bumps very well. You'd think just look up the flat seat like you said, but these shocks along the sides here, the Cuba shock system works very good. Very good for absorbing all the bumps I went over today and encountered. So,
notice you were doing a lot of roll-ons, a lot of snapping away from our cameras. You were leaning it over in the corners. You were slaloming a little bit. Like, how did it just feel to ride? It looked to me like you were sort of having fun. It looked almost like it was lighter than you expected it to be.
Absolutely. The given weight it's over 500 pounds, but it does not feel like that when you're riding it. Once you're up to speed, it doesn't feel heavy at all. It just feels kind of light, and it feels like it's a light, sporty 750 motorcycle. I could ride it all weekend.
So how did you find the actual riding position itself? It's pretty sort of sit-up for me. What about for yourself?
Yeah, I found for myself, with myself just being under 6 feet tall, I found the riding position perfect. The seat height on this is 30.5 inches high, so it works good for a lot of perhaps shorter riders, but I know it will work with taller riders too, just because the way the front handlebars are angled. So it kind of covers all rider heights. You can choose to be sporty if you want, or you can just cruise at that ergonomic stance in the cockpit there. It works really well.
How did you find the instrument layout? I think it's about as basic and retro as you can get. You've got a speedo, an attack, and a few switches. How did you find all that?
I find it easy to use, clear and quick to read when you want to read it. It's all you need for going out for a weekend cruise.
What did you think of the product itself? Did it surprise you?
It did. Actually, for some reason when I look at this motorcycle, I ride it, I hop off and look at it, I think this motorcycle is kind of like when you go to the store and you want to buy a watch. This is like one of the higher end watches for sale. It's steel, it's classy, it's just genuine. I don't know, something about it. It's just got this nostalgia about it.
Yeah.
Kind of gets you into it.
What did you really like about the bike? What was sort of the big #1 surprise?
Number one surprise for me was the first gear, how tall it was. It was just, you just engage the clutch and off you go, and it went a long ways. And it reminded me, that this just isn't a small CC motorcycle. It's 865 cc's, so you got some power underneath you. So
Right.
quite impressed with that.
So who do you think would enjoy a motorcycle like this? And what would they do with it?
Well, this motorcycle will definitely cater to men and women of all ages. I wouldn't say it's a bike to start out on because it does have a lot of torque, there's a lot of power there, even though it doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
But definitely history nuts. Men and women that are interested in the heritage of a company such as Triumph, they have a history. It's definitely buying a brand new product, engineered for today, brought back from time. That's all I can really say. You just got to go to the store and check it out. It's beautiful.
It reminded me a lot, and I know you're a Harley fan, it reminded me a lot of the Sportster. You know, that sort of elemental, retro, not a lot of bells and whistles. Would you say that's about as close as it comes to that analogy?
Yeah, it actually reminded me of that as well, Dave. I noticed when I was on the throttle earlier today too, when you get on the throttle in the high revs, it felt like a Sportster. It felt similar to that. Lots of pull, and it kind of peters out near the higher end of the rev range.
So what will you tell your friends when you go back home about this bike? What's going to be the lasting impression?
I just drove a piece of time, a beautiful piece of steel that's very classy, engineered to today's standards, and I'm very lucky to be able to try it out today.
Well, you did a great job for us, and it looked like you had a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you,
Daryl.
Daryl.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming down.